Thanks for joining me as we look at how MOOCs have the potential to change higher ed. Before I get to the MOOC part of this presentation, I want to look at traditional universities and the role they play in educating students and their outcomes, degrees, hopefully. Now, we're all very familiar with how universities work. Universities hire faculty to, well, for lots of reasons, but for this purpose, to teach students 4 credit courses, which then add up to, hopefully, a degree which they can take to the workplace. Now, students pay tuition to universities, and depending on the type of university they attend, that tuition can be the large source of their income or a smaller source. So at private universities, tuition generally makes up a larger percentage of their operating revenue. And at public universities like the University of Wyoming, where we're very fortunate to have a generous legislature who supports the University of Wyoming, our tuition covers a small portion of the operating expenses here at UW. But regardless of what type of institution you attend, the outcome or the hopeful outcome is the same, that you as a student pay tuition and you graduate with a degree, which allows you to move into the work field and obtain a higher paying job than you would have if you had not had a degree. I want to look at what I think most of us are familiar with, and that is the rising cost of college tuition. And this is just a fun little comic I found online that I think speaks to this situation. It's a bit dramatic. You see this college student here carrying this large backpack that says college tuition that's just huge. And an older male telling him, oh, stop belly aching. It's just 5% more than last year. Now, this may seem funny, but there is some truth to this. And I want to look at those figures so we can get a better sense of that. So let's look first at the rising cost of tuition versus income. So here we can see in 1974, the cost of attending a 4-year institution was $10,783. And I should mention the numbers in this graph are adjusted to 2013 dollars. So the cost of attending college in 1973, adjusted for inflation, 10,000 bucks. And if we look, this trend line is hugely positive. And if we look there at 2013, that same yearly tuition cost is $30,000. This is for the cost of tuition at a 4-year institution in the United States. Now, that's a 300% positive increase. You might think, reasonably so, if higher education costs more, the return on that investment is thus worth more. And if we look at median income, we just don't see that. This red line here represents median income in the US. 1973, adjusted in 2013 dollars, $27,000 was the median income in the US. If we skip ahead to 2014, we can see that that new median income is $33,000. So while college tuition has increased 300%, median income is relatively unchanged, from $27,000 to $34,000 or $33,000. Now, let's drill down a little further. And let's look at tuition versus earnings over the last 10 years. Because you might think median income doesn't represent those students with a college degree. And if we look at those students with a college degree, maybe we'll see something different. So let's look at the last 10 years. And let's look at that same college tuition right here in yellow. We'd see 2003, that college tuition at a 4-year university in the US averaged $24,000. And in 2014, 13-14, that's $30,000. So same numbers. And we can see that positive trend line there. Let's look at people with a bachelor's degree and their median income. I should mention again, these numbers are adjusted to 2013 dollars. So if we look here in 2003, the median income of a bachelor's degree holder in the US, $52,000. And we can see there's a negative trend line here. So $53,000 in 2003 to $48,686 in 2013. So what we're seeing is that the cost of that bachelor's degree is steadily rising from 2003 to 2014. And yet the return on that investment, the return for that college degree in the workplace, has moved from $52,000 down to $48,000. So what does this mean? Well, when students can't afford to pay cash for their college degree, but they believe their earnings will make that up, they borrow. And they borrow in huge numbers. This is a graph of the total loans owned by the federal government in Sallie Mae. And I couldn't find a more current one, and I apologize for that, but this gets us to 2012. This is what we see. So we see a 300% increase in student tuition cost. And when students can't pay for that, they borrow the money. And they borrow the money thinking their new job will help them pay that back when they graduate. And that's not happening. Here's what's happening. We are seeing the highest level of student loan delinquents and defaults in history. So students are borrowing money to pay for rising education costs, hoping, believing, with that education, they'll be able to recoup that cost. And in fact, the opposite is happening. The value of that college degree is declining. So what does that mean? And what do we do about it? I think MOOCs are one possible answer, and I think they are worth looking at in terms of providing access to education to more individuals and increasing that return on investment. So we all know about MOOCs. MOOCs are massively online open courses, and they're created by instructors in an open course online environment. So you have instructors creating content for students to consume and learn from in a group-like environment or an online course environment. Often these MOOCs are popular, and so they have thousands of students. Now in the beginning, MOOCs weren't used for credit classes. That is, that you couldn't get college credit for taking a MOOC. And completion rates in MOOCs were really low. We're still in the early stages of getting completion rates back, but the early MOOCs ranged from 3 to 4% completion rates. And we think there are a number of reasons for that, but one of them that is proposed by the literature that I read was that students didn't have the incentive. So colleges are now offering MOOCs for credit. That is, you can take a MOOC and get college credit for that. And even further, some colleges are experimenting with allowing students to assemble those MOOC college credits into a degree. Often, these MOOCs are free, and if you take them for college credit, they are very low cost. So students are paying smaller sums of money for tuition. And it's important to note that while these MOOCs are being offered for free, they do have costs associated with them, right? You start paying that content expert, you still have to pay for that hosting solution, and you're paying TAs and graders to guide this MOOC to completion. However, you're doing it more efficiently. You're not paying for the brick and mortar for that school or for that class. That class is happening in the online environment. And many have said that MOOCs are just the next iteration of distance or online education. But the ultimate goal is the same, that you have a MOOC, you assemble those MOOCs for credit into a degree program, and you graduate more students. And those students aren't faced with the same risks associated with the traditional university. So I didn't mention earlier, but I'll mention now, that only 60% of students who attend a traditional university graduate in 6 years. 60% graduate in 6 years. Now MOOCs have a lower completion rate initially, is what we're seeing. We don't know if we incentivize that with college credit or degree programs what those completion rates will be. But if you fail in a MOOC, your consequence is much lower. You're not burdened by thousands of dollars in student loans. If you attend a traditional university and you don't complete your degree, you still have to pay back that giant student loan debt. So the theory that I have is that we can use MOOCs to provide more access to higher education at a more affordable rate with lower risks for students. And the return on the investment will be much greater. So while an MBA at a traditional university might cost $45,000 to $100,000, an MBA in a MOOC style format might cost as little as $7,000. And the income potential would be very great. Now, the true test will be, do employers or will employers recognize these credentials, and will they pay them equally? Essentially, if these people are qualified to do the same work, will they receive the same salaries? So thanks for joining me. That's just a very brief overview of where I think MOOCs are going and how they could change higher ed. I've embedded interactive graphs that talk about or show these numbers and figures in this unit. Feel free to play around with those and post your responses to this video in the discussion.